it's really lovely to be with Will again this morning. The last 2 weeks we've had separate things, so you might have seen that he's posted some of his own learnings, but it's lovely to be with you again, Will. And
Okay.
and today we just want to share with you. I always say, as a coach, you are your biggest tool. The full saying is, you are your biggest tool, so don't be a tool. Okay, but in all seriousness, as a coach, you have an impact. It is something that as coaches we do not like to, or we find it hard. Let me speak for myself. I find it hard to acknowledge that being there is never neutral. Being with the system is, I do not have an impact. We have an impact through our being, the way that we are. We have an impact through the lenses that we choose to look at a team. We have an impact um, through what we choose to reveal to the system. There's a lot of impact, and it is something that we need to handle with great care. So maybe you can share what what our experience was in a
Mm.
system this week.
Yeah, so thinking about a specific system and how I showed up. So I like making observations about what is going on. And this specific system that we've been working with has, I think, yeah, just so aware of even us talking about this and saying it. So it's one of the observations we actually made is that there seems to be a bias for action, and there seems to be a bias for following and closed. In other words, being told what to do next. Um, and yeah, so we were working through something, the team was in conversation, and I made a bystander observation about what is going on, which followed on a observation of a pattern that we've been seeing happen for a while. We usually work that way. Antoinette, what is it? 3 times we see something before we
Yes,
name it, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So I offered the observation, and it kind of became awkwardly quiet, which is fine. And the next thing was somebody in the team saying, "Well, I'm not entirely," so they said something like, "I'm not entirely sure what the instruction is." Um, and realizing that how I showed up in offering the observation didn't necessarily meet them where they were at if we knew that they had a bias for action and looking for what they need to do next. And that I had an impact. In that instance, um, the the hoped for impact on the system by offering the observation didn't land in that way. It had a very different impact, which we then had to unpack and work with. So my observation is that our our hypothesis that there is a bias for action is already an impact. The fact that we shared that made an impact, and it may even imply that we I don't know about you, but I remember conversations we had over coffee once. Like, is it okay for coaches to want to have anything different for the system? Like, if you identify that there's a very big bias for action, maybe there could be something else. That's already an impact, as a coach. So this whole thing about be neutral, is it even possible?
Mm, yeah. And there's as you say that there's two things that come for me, at least. So the one thing is that the way that we are being, the way that we look, without even saying anything, we express a preference for a different way of being. So in our energy, it is really important that there is space for people to be different than how we show up. Um, and in our heads, there needs to be clarity that the way I show up is my way of being leaderful. It is not the system's way of being leaderful. So that's the one thing that we need to be really, really clean in ourselves and really aware of the energy that we give off and what that may imply to those that we coach. So there's a lot of subtlety and a lot of work there potentially for us as coaches. The other thing as well is that once we realize the impact our mere presence has on a system that we are working with, a team or or a group that we are working with, um, it becomes possible to consciously decide, do we want to create more perturbance at this point, or do we want to create less perturbance? Given what the system wants, which is why it's so important to agree with them about what the goal of coaching is with us, because that is what we need to hold. If it's not our agenda, it's their agenda. So if they've agreed what they would like to achieve through the coaching process, holding that and really very carefully examining our motives for bringing in a specific tool, a specific process, um, meeting them where they are in terms of how they are as a group, how much difference do we want to bring, what would serve them the best in in terms of getting closer to that state that they want, that they've chosen and defined with us, that they would like to grow to. That makes it possible for us to also refine our own way of showing up, um, and have choice and very much be conscious and aware of what it is that we want to bring and how it is that we want to be and what it is that we even want to lift out in the coaching process and ask about, because all of those things reveal pretty much a place that we stand in, a view that we have, um, even a judgment sometimes about what's good or what's bad, getting closer or further away from the agenda of the client.
Yeah. I remember so many, especially in the beginning of team coaching engagements, how many times we've experienced when we're off an observation, the immediate assumption is that people feel us making the observation tells them that the behavior is wrong.
Mm,
And having to learn that part of our model is very early in the game to actually say, um, I really don't actually care how you behave.
mm,
I'm just making an observation and noticing the impact. I may be wrong.
mm,
So part of what you mentioned was being clean. I know what clean looks like for me, partly is being transparent
mm,
as a coach.
mm,
So as soon as I know there's a bias to say it,
mm,
um, as soon as I know that I've got a, a connection to choose a tool that may help to address, I say that this is something that's coming up for me. There are other options. I can explore the pros
mm,
and cons and I leave them a choice.
mm,
Um, because I'm still a tool, but
mm,
I need to bring options so that there's not a
mm,
specific bias. And then the other thing was to reflect and really deeply think about my range of behaviors.
mm,
I like to ask questions in a specific way, and I
mm,
know that if it doesn't land, then I need to have a range of asking it
mm,
differently.
mm,
Um,
mm,
Same with behavior. Like if a team keeps on directing their communication to me, um, I can say, please address the team, but if that is taken as a rebuke, what I can also do, if there's sensitivity around that, is simply turn around and go and stand behind the person.
mm, mm,
Um, so having a range of behaviors, etc.,
mm,
that help you to change the impact or lessen the impact or shape the impact in a way that brings more neutrality.
mm.
What are you hearing as I say this? How do you do
I
it?
mean, so there is something for me. So you're particularly good at, it's something that I'm learning from you, um, how to be, how to state choices, um, and not inadvertently make one based on some information that I'm receiving, in the energy of the system. So it is something that as a facilitator, I tend to do after many years of facilitation. I can play with energy in the room. So sometimes I make up stories in my head about what's the best thing for the group to do now. So I admire your ability to simply do a readout and do a bystand, like we would say in structural dynamics, do a bystand and then leave people a choice. Okay, so you're particularly good at it. What also comes for me is just being exquisitely aware of how our questions, how our observations land, and being able to either amplify it or dial it down based on what's happening in the group, what they are ready for. And even that, you know, to ask about it. So
Mm.
to share that exquisite awareness for people, which very often in the beginning of a team coaching journey it leaves people really confused. The the the, the level of awareness that that we bring into a room about what is going on, because it lowers the waterline, like an iceberg. Um, it lowers the waterline for people, and it um, brings the possibility of working with underlying motives, behaviors, unintended impacts, etc. So also being able to, in the moment, the same way that you have a range of questions, a range of expressions of the same thing, to be able to amplify or dial down or pivot slightly, or and that requires practice. It requires, for me, it's always been, what are the words that need to come out of my mouth, so not as to be a bull in a china shop, um, when I work with people. So articulation is a big part of being a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I recall from this specific example that I used is that your observation, my focus was somewhere else,
Yes.
and your observation about that silence actually revealed what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have a co-coach, because
Yeah.
as an individual coach, you can do it, but it's so much harder.
Yeah.
Um, Having a co-coach, according to the competencies as well in ICF, is you bring a co-coach if it will help to bring more presence to the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think in this topic specifically, looking at the impact and looking at neutrality and how we are showing up to create more
Yeah.
neutrality
Yeah.
is really useful, because you can see things that in the moment when I'm holding space around a conversation, I won't necessarily be able to. And
Yeah.
you know my biases and you know how
Yes.
I ask
Yes.
questions. So
Yes.
it really, really, really helps.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Great. So I'm aware that we can continue talking about this,
Mm.
and we specifically try and keep these quite short. So we'll leave you with that this week. Let us know what you think.